Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Whale Nerds Podcast. This is episode 130. My name is Slater, and I'm here with Caitlin.
Hello. And we also have a special guest this week. Andy Rogan is joining us. Andy is a marine mammal biologist who has been working with Ocean Alliance for over a decade. He has worked across the globe, and his career has focused on applications of low-cost technologies in marine mammal science, with an emphasis on drone technology. He has been the science manager of Ocean Alliance's SnotBot program since its inception. Welcome, Andy. Thank you for being on with us today.
Thanks very much for having me. Really happy to be here.
So, I don't know if you want to add anything to kind of your background, but we are going to talk all things SnotBot this episode. But maybe you could add a little bit about like, how did you get interested in marine science, or like, what was your path to Ocean Alliance?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's two main influences. One were these kids' books, which are now very outdated, but they were written in the 60s and 70s by an author called Willard Price. And I love them. I still have them here. You know, they're written in the 60s or so, but they taught me an awful lot about animals. I think that the author had a really solid understanding of animals, of animal behavior, of how ecosystems work. And he communicated that in a beautiful way. And I loved it. And I couldn't get enough of those books. So I must have read each one, I don't know how many times, a lot of times. And then the second thing is my uncle, actually, he gave me a birthday card when I was 5. He runs Ocean Alliance now, so there's a bit of serendipity here. He gave me a birthday card when I was 5 and has a dolphin on the front, and it says, I hope to put you face to face with one of these one day. And, you know, however many years on, 29 years on, I'm working for him. So he provided that focus into marine biology. You know, he was always the role model. I always wanted to be a marine biologist when I was growing up. And I wasn't very good at science for a while. I had to, you know, find my way a little bit, and I did some other things. And yeah, it was always his direction for the marine mammals, and then Willard Price, the author, for the wildlife in general.
Oh, that's so cool. I didn't know that the current leader of Ocean Alliance is your uncle.
That's awesome.
That's really cool. Actually, can you give us a little history of Ocean Alliance? I mean, I know their story from working in Gloucester because we talk about the organization every trip, but I think it's a really cool piece of history in that area.
Yeah, sure. No, absolutely. So Ocean Alliance was founded in 1971 by Dr. Roger Payne. And Dr. Payne has now moved on from Ocean Alliance, but he was one of the founders, or one of the pioneers of like modern whale biology. And he was certainly a really important, sort of person in the Save the Whale movement, which, you know, obviously many whales are alive today because of the success of the Save the Whale movement in the 70s and early 80s. And he discovered that humpback whales sing songs. He's well known for that, along with Katie Payne and Scott McVeigh. And you know, he was just a really influential biologist in the early days of marine mammal science. You know, before the sort of 50s and 60s and 70s and Roger's work and other big scientists at the time, whales weren't really thought of, you know, in the same way that they are today in the public. You know, they were these big, not monsters necessarily. No one was getting attacked by whales, but we really didn't understand much about them. And that early science really started to shed light on how intelligent they are, how enigmatic, mysterious they are, and all this stuff, and really helped turn the tide of, you know, not only fueled the Save the Whale movement, right, but also, you know, just shaped the modern perception of whales in the public. And I think Ocean Alliance, and in particular, Roger, played a really important role in that. So it was mainly a research organization. Roger, yeah, you know, he was a biologist, and it was sort of, the idea was more can be learned from a live whale than a dead whale. There wasn't much science going on back then, and that was Roger's founding sort of ethos. And yeah, you know, since then, it was one of the first organizations in the world dedicated to protecting whales through research. Yeah, through then, you know, it's been 50 years and we've done a lot of different things, gone a lot of different directions. Obviously, I've only been involved for a fifth of that. But yeah, you know, it's sort of been a mainstay, I think, of whale science, particularly in the northeast of the States for a long time. But we have worked around the globe as well.
How did the idea Excuse me. How did the idea for SnotBot come about?
Yeah, so the boss, Ian Kerr, he has always been an engineer, technologist. That's actually how he started out. He used to build hovercrafts back in the day, and he got into whale science through Roger. And this was in the Gulf of Mexico, I think, in 2012, and we were doing a program. We were looking at the impacts of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill on the whales in the northern Gulf of Mexico. A lot of people don't realize there are a lot of whales in the Gulf of Mexico, which is super cool. A lot of sperm whales, not many baleen whales. There's Rice's whale, the newly discovered Rice's whale. We actually got a biopsy from one, which is really exciting. But
nice.
Quick tangent, it's one of the most endangered mammals or animals on the planet. So that was really exciting that we did that. But yeah, I took myself off tangent then. What was the question again? Oh, how did it stop?
How did it come about?
I got excited talking about rice as well. Sorry.
That's okay. We get excited too.
Whale nerds, right? Yeah. So we're biopsying sperm whales. So we're on this big old boat called the Odyssey, which is this great old research vessel, but very slow. And I don't know if you've spent much time with sperm whales, but you find one, you see it from a way off. We're biopsying them, so you have to get up close to the animal, and then the animal dives, and it's down for like 45 minutes or so, and it's annoying, right? It's really annoying. Obviously, the whale's doing what it's meant to do. Like that's we're not annoyed at the whale, obviously. But so Ian was sitting on the bow of the Odyssey. He was about to biopsy it, and it dove. And it exhaled one last time before it dove, and he got covered in the mist and the snot, essentially. It's not technically snot, or it depends on the definitions there, but the exhaled breath condensate, the respiratory sample, whatever you call it, and it stinks, right? It stunk. And that's a sign that there's something in there. There's biological material in there. And I guess that was the initial thought. And he was already interested in drones. And then it was, right, can we fly a drone through this cloud, and what's in there? And other people have done some studies in captivity, and some researchers in Mexico have done some really cool pioneering stuff that was sort of the precursor to SnotBot with a gas-powered helicopter. It went from there. And so the next year we took some drones down. We didn't have permits to do anything with whales yet, but it sort of all came from there. And then SnotBot was a Kickstarter campaign. They got Sir Patrick Stewart involved, which was really cool. He's the honorary chairman of Ocean Alliance. So he filmed like a video. Yeah, it's fun. It's a fun video. They flew out to LA to film that with him. And, it was successfully funded. And Patagonia in 2015, October 2015 was the first SnotBot expedition. And I think we've done 15 or 16 now. So it's been a fun time.
That's awesome. I would have thought that the SnotBot came, like the idea from it would have been like they were filming whales, and then it covered the camera, and they were like, oh, we could put a petri dish on this and get a 2-for-1.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the other, it was Karina Espada Whitehouse, the Mexican researcher who did it, and maybe that's where it came from for her. But from our point of view, it was we didn't actually know about that yet, and it was through Ian getting covered in that, and he already was a hobbyist. He flew remote control helicopters, little tiny ones and stuff. So he was already interested in drones, and it was sort of those his natural hobby and his experience in whale biology coming together that led to SnotBot.
Do you know what kind of drones they started using at first?
Yeah, so at first we were working with a local engineering college in Boston called Olin College of Engineering, and they were actually building the drones for us. And that had its advantages, but we eventually started using the DJI drones, and DJI, right, is the leader now in for those who don't know, in at least public drone technology, and they're just so much more practical. The R&D that these big groups like DJI are doing, they're so easy to fly. They're just getting better and better. It just, everything is so much easier, and it's pretty inexpensive as well, right? And you can get spare parts, and it's just so much more practical, at least in my opinion, for field work, particularly when you know, spare parts can be hard to come across, and you don't want things breaking down. You don't want to be messing around with software changes the whole time. So in the end, we switched to consumer drones, and yeah, we've tried like a bunch of different manufacturers' drones, but at the moment, we're really the DJI drones work really well for us.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, they are definitely leading in the drone space.
So do you have to still customize those DJI drones quite a bit, or do they have like mounts and stuff now that work pretty well for what you do?
Yeah, you know, the actual drone, we're not customizing that much. We do have extra legs that we put on them, extra, you know, 3D attachments, things like that, that really help. You know, you can put more Petri dishes on them, or they provide a really good place to catch the drone. You know, when you're out on the boat, it's really hard to, if you're on a small boat, at least it's hard to land the drone on the boat. So we always hand launch and recover the drone. So someone will hold the drone up, the pilot will take out of their hands, and then we'll catch it when it's coming back in. So with these extra handholds, it makes that a lot safer and easier. Certainly, you know, there are some, you know, some settings are turned on, some are turned off. You know, through the process, there are a bunch of different things, from the screens and the radio signals that the pilot is using. We've got our robotics manager now called Chris Zadra is great with, you know, all this tech stuff. And I don't really know what he's doing with the drone. I don't think he's not like hacking into the software, but there are a bunch of different changes that, you know, make it safer, make it more practical. And, you know, because you're still flying a drone over whales, over water, you know, it's,
yeah,
you don't want to lose anything. You don't want any mistakes. So there are a few things that he does do, and that we've, you know, our process has evolved through time. And tell you what, when we're going out on the boat, we have so many batteries, and we have a whole setup for charging them. And because that's the main thing we're doing, right? These days, when we go on expedition, if you're going out on the water for 12 hours, you got to have a lot of batteries. You got to have your charging stations. So now when we go out, it's a pretty well-oiled machine, but we've got a whole big setup for how all the drone stuff works. And there are stations at night, you know, in our hotel, whatever, for Airbnb for charging all the batteries and all that. So it's a whole big process. But yeah, for the most part, it's minimally modified, the actual physical drone.
Nice.
Cool. So when you get footage of you taking the sample, like the footage you guys use to share how your work is done, are you flying two drones, or are you able to have the camera work while you're taking this sample?
Yeah, both. So the camera does keep working the whole time, you know, while we're flying the drone. And actually the pilot he's flying FPV. So he's flying from the point of view of the drone. So that's how he gets into, or she gets into position to collect that sample. At the same time, we have used 360-degree cameras. So it's like it's mounted on a pole away from the drone, and it looks back at the drone, and it somehow the software like cuts out the pole. I don't know how that works, but some of the images and the videos that are on social media that have done really well are those 360-degree shots, where it's actually the camera is mounted on the drone and it's looking back at it. So these really cool shots that you can see the whole drone, you can see the whale and all that. But we also have done drone-on-drone camera shots where there's another drone at a higher altitude, or, you know, not necessarily at a higher altitude, but filming the whole thing. So we've at this stage, we've done it all. Yeah.
That 360 camera idea was a really good idea to showcase the drone actually doing its job, collecting the snot. Like, I mean, and you could definitely get it topside from the boat or using another drone, but I think that's pretty cool because you're like it's like right on the drone and you see the spout going past. So that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. Hey, it wasn't my idea. I can't take credit for that, but no, and some of our more recent work as well. We've done that as well, and the footage is really cool. It really just it just illustrates, not well, illustrates in the right word. It visualizes so well what's going on. So it's cool stuff, the 360 stuff. Yeah.
I think you mentioned that you've been to about 15 places now with the SnotBot. What are some of the places that it's been deployed?
Yeah, so a lot of places we've just been going back to. You know, we've been to Loreto, Baja California, I think 6 times now. We went to Alaska a couple times earlier on in the program, Southeast Alaska, Chatham Strait, Frederick Sound, which is it's a pretty nice place to go. We've done Dominican Republic, Argentina, Gabon in West Africa, or sort of Southwest Africa, was a really fun one in 2018. I was actually I was reading my diary from that last night, so that brought up some fun memories from that trip. And that was certainly the more remote, most remote region that we've worked in with SnotBot. The Azores, it's an island chain in the Atlantic, Portuguese island chain, the sort of northwest Canary Islands, like right in the middle, a little bit towards Europe from the northeast of the US, the east coast of the US, but right out in the middle. That was last summer. That was really cool. It's just this very volcanic, so these really dramatic landscapes, these big, beautiful islands. That was a lot of fun. We were there doing sperm whales, but we also saw Brutus and sei whales there, which was really cool, and a bunch of toothed whales and dolphins and stuff. So yeah, I think that's I think, and then we do our regional work in the Gulf of Maine off Boston as well. So I think that's all the places we've been. Yeah.
Wow.
Cool.
Good amount of places though.
Yeah. I didn't know
Yeah,
you guys had worked off
it's really
Africa.
cool. No complaints. Yeah, that was 2018. It was the Austral winter. So yeah, it was like August, September of 2018, and BBC came out as well, and they did a film shoot with us for a documentary called Equator from the Air. And this presenter called Gordon Buchanan, who, like, I grew up, watching his stuff on TV on the nature docs. He was there. He was the presenter, so it was really fun working with him and that team. But yeah, working in Gabon was a lot of fun. It was a cool place to work. So that was humpbacks.
Oh, okay, nice. So do you mostly do larger cetacean species, or have you guys used it on like dolphins or porpoises or anything?
Yeah, so SnotBot, it really differs in how hard it is between the different species, and for a number of reasons, and from not only physiological but behavioral, right? So a blue whale, if you have a blue whale and it's like 90 feet long and it's exhaling, and that cloud is going 30-40 feet in the air, it's really easy to collect a sample from it. Now, blue whales can be tricky because they can dive for a long time, they can come up and not spend much time at the surface, but dolphins, on the other hand, they're quick, more dynamic movements, and that cloud of vapor of snot it's only going like a foot or two above the water. So it's much more difficult, and you've got to fly much lower. You've got to have a better pilot. We have actually done it, and for the first time, we did it about a month ago. Chris went down to South Carolina, and he was collecting some samples with NOAA and the College of Charleston there. And yeah, it's super recent, so we haven't actually, or they haven't analyzed those samples yet. But so he did collect samples, but it's certainly much more difficult to do that with the smaller species like dolphins. So the smallest that we've tried so far is orca. We tried some orca in Alaska. And then there are a few other groups who have done, there's a group in Cascadia in, their Pacific group, for you or for your listeners. It's a well-researched education nonprofit, mainly operating in Hawaii and the Pacific and California and stuff. And they've collected samples from a few smaller species as well, I think, which is really cool. But yeah, the smallest we've done is orca. Well, and dolphins until, like a month ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
sadly, I feel like they've done a lot of that kind of research in captivity with the smaller dolphins and stuff, although it's different based because they're wild. But yeah, it makes sense that the baleen whales are much easier to work with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sperm whales, I guess.
Cool. So we have a lot of questions about like whale snot in general.
Yeah.
So what sort of data are you getting with the SnotBot? Like, is it hormones? Is it DNA? I know there's like bacteria.
Yeah, so that's sort of evolved. Well, it hasn't. Obviously, we've always been collecting the same things, but on the different expeditions, there are different priorities. And certainly when we started doing it, we didn't know how best to process the samples, how best to store them, how best to collect them. And then the labs that we're working with, we don't do the analyses in-house. We send the samples to partner labs. So even they were working through the process, how to best analyze these samples, how to best extract the DNA and the hormones and all of this stuff. So it's certainly changed through time. Genetics is definitely a big one. You know, that's the host animal, you know, the genetics of the whale itself. And again, you know, for people who aren't familiar, it's genetics for whales is really important for protecting whales. It's like a who's who of whales, right? And it's you know, it's DNA. So it's who is this whale? Who is it related to? You know, it's population health. How healthy is population? Who's related to? Where are these animals going? All that kind of information that, you know, genetics has been really important for protecting whales in the last 30, 40 years or so. So that is one. But at the same time, with genetics, there are some populations of whales that we already have a pretty solid database of the genetics, or different labs do. So there are some areas, some populations of whales where we don't focus on the genetics because there isn't that much we can learn. There isn't as much value in that. So then, you know, it's more about the hormones or the microbiomes, which is, the microorganisms that live in the respiratory sample. And the hormones is both really exciting and frustrating. It's, you know, it's not with the DNA and the microbiomes, it's more presence absence. Like, is it there? Is it not? Is the genetic material there? Is it not? With the hormones, you need to know the concentration as well, right? What levels of testosterone or estrogen or corticosteroids, the stress hormones, does this animal have in it? That's the information we really want. But some of this snot sample is seawater, and it's really hard to figure that out, to sort of control for seawater. So we're working on it, and we have made progress, which is exciting, but we're not quite at the stage where you get a sample and you say, this whale was this stressed. So we're working towards that. And certainly the reproductive hormones, we're having more success there because, you know, with reproductive hormones, if a female is pregnant or is, you know, whatever, then its hormones can often be quite drastically different from what they would be. So it's a little bit easier, but the hormones is tricky. And then the final one is microbiomes, and that's the one that we're doing most of at the moment. We're working with GMGI, Gloucester Marine Genomics, which is a group local to us in Gloucester. They're analyzing the samples, and it's, you know, the respiratory microbiome. These are the microorganisms that live in the respiratory tract of the whales. And they change in response to different conditions. And, you know, it's similar to, you know, why people tell us to drink kombucha and stuff like that. That's our gut microbiome. That's the microbiome in our stomachs. And we're looking at this, and it changes, you know, and so we're hoping, you know, we think by monitoring the microbiome and how it changes, we can see, right, these bacteria are associated with a healthy whale. These ones are associated with an unhealthy whale. These ones are indicative of this disease, that disease. So it's really exciting. And the last year or two, we've really been making a lot of progress there, which is exciting. That was a long answer. I apologize.
That's okay. That was perfect. I do have a follow-up question about the bacteria. Does it grow better under pressure? Is that right? Some of it or something?
You know, I don't know. I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that question. I have heard things about that. I'm sure certain species do, but I'm not sure. But I can look that up for you and get back to you.
Yeah, it's one of those like naturalist things that like flies out on the boats in New England because they love talking about SnotBot. But I was like, is that true? That it grows better under pressure?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, you know, different species, I'm sure, evolved for different environments and different, you know, pressure levels. But I don't know the answer to that, I'm afraid.
Okay, fair enough.
All right, I have a couple questions out of this one question. What do you, first of all, say, what do you think whale breath smells like to you?
Well, it doesn't smell good. It's the easy answer. You know, actually, you can find that the animals that aren't feeding as much, that doesn't seem to be, I don't know if there's a correlation there, but it doesn't seem to be as smelly. You know, it sort of smells fishy, I think. You know, it's that's sort of the basic. It smells pretty fishy, but it's, you know, there's also like a mental thing, like when you're smelling that, you know that you're sort of in this cloud of whale breath, and you know, it's not just the fishy smell. It's, you know, sometimes you get like the water on you, the vapor on you, and there's something a little, you know, that's
sulfury broccoli smell.
Yeah, I think it smells like rotting vegetables.
Right.
So you actually kind of you kind of mentioned in your answer was they tend to smell more on the feeding grounds. So I've heard
Yeah,
that it's not necessarily their breath from eating, and that it's technically bacteria in their lungs. Do you know about that?
no, I mean, I don't. That makes far
Yeah.
more sense. The feeding thing is totally anecdotal.
Yeah.
It's just from experience, and that could be. I'm not trying to make a scientific statement
Yeah.
with that. It's just something that we've sort of found in a few times, but that could be totally coincidental because it doesn't really make sense. Maybe people who understand whale physiology better than me could work that out. I don't know, but yeah, I'm not sure.
I want how if you sleep after you sleep, your breath smells worse because you're mouth breathing or breathing more. I wonder if it's because they're taking more breaths on the breeding ground because I don't know, because they're resting a lot more on the breeding grounds than they are the feeding grounds. But it could go both ways. The males could be up at the surface fighting a lot more too. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and it could differ between species. Maybe it's just certain species that we've only worked with on the calving grounds, that they just have better breath. It's an interesting question, and I don't know. I'll ask my colleagues if they have, because that's just what I've picked up in my head. And the respiratory tract, it's separate from the feeding mechanism, right? So I don't know what's going on there, but I don't know, but that's good. It's nice when there are questions that we don't know. Maybe there are biologists out there who do know the answer to that, but I like when things are unanswered.
Yeah, I've worked in Maui the last 3 winters. I'm headed there again, but the whales don't smell when they're there. But I've worked on the feeding grounds too, and they smell really ripe.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, maybe that. I think there is something going on, but I don't know. I don't know what the mechanism would be there, but I'm sure better biologists than I would know. And maybe as a SnotBot scientist, I should know the answer to that question. But I'll ask. I'll be putting out some questions after this podcast, and I'll see if I can get some answers from some friends and collaborators and stuff.
It could be an air temperature thing. Maybe the scent is not as noticeable because it's warm air in the Hawaiian Islands, and then up in the feeding grounds, it's cold. But in New England, it gets pretty hot in the summer and they still smell. So I don't know. But
yeah, and I think also what Slater, what you mentioned in terms of that activity, I think that's probably a big one, because now thinking about it, when we've worked on the calving grounds, it can be really hard to collect a sample when the animal's logging, it's resting, and it's a very little spout, right? It's a very little blow. Whereas when they're diving, when they're feeding, when they're all over the place, they can, those blows tend to be a little bit bigger. And, again, to your point, if there are animals that are on the calving grounds that are in some sort of mating activity and they're more energetic, they're expending more energy, we've seen when they're breaching and all of that, they can come up and, spout, those huge blows. So maybe it's just something to do with more the size and the amount of material in that blow more than anything. But I'm not sure.
Well,
it
another
smells.
question. Yeah, another question to figure out. It definitely smells though. So what are sort of the assessment applications for using a SnotBot in cetacean research? Can you use it to actively assess a whale in distress, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so certainly the hormones there is the big one with the stress hormones. And we haven't quite figured that out, but we are getting there. But that's such an explicit indicator of how well an animal is doing. Stress is a response to something negative or perceived as negative. And if an animal is super stressed, that's also bad for the animal, because it's sort of, it diverts resources away from other areas to it's fight or flight, right? So if an animal is stressed, that is not good for it, and something is bothering it. So that is a really explicit one. The microbiome stuff, we will be able to do that. It's a matter of time. We've just got to work through it. Like with any new thing, I'm sure when people were first collecting biopsies, it took a few years before they were like, right, this means that this is a baseline. You need to collect enough data. And also it depends on the species, right? So different species will have different baselines of different, stress hormones, reproductive hormones, microbiome, organisms, microbes, whatever, stuff like that. the genetics, absolutely. I mean, genetics for a long time has been used for really important conservation purposes to protect whales. So that's one that's already happening. And, we published a paper in January of this year, January 2022, which was this big SnotBot sort of collaborative paper with like 4 or 5 different labs. And we went through all of this and the sort of conservation implications. And, the great thing is that it's non-invasive, right? Or it's far less invasive than a lot, things like biopsying. At least, the evidence we have suggests that, often the whale doesn't know we're there. And you're also actively collecting it. So you can choose when to collect it. It's not like sloughed skin when, if a whale breaches and leaves some skin behind. That's a great source of genetics, but you don't know if it's going to do that. You can't rely on it. The same with fecal samples. You don't know when it's going to do it. So it's hard to rely on collecting genetic data from those methods, whereas with SnotBot, with that method, you can do it non-invasively, and you're actively collecting that sample. You're not just hoping that the animal sloughs some skin or defecates, etc.
Yeah, they're going to breathe at some point.
Right, yeah. If they don't, then that's there's something wrong there as well. So, yeah.
I was thinking about the stress levels. It's kind of cool because you never know. Well, the thing is they could get stressed from, like, let's say it's humpbacks in the breeding grounds and there was killer whales the day before. And then, you know what I mean? Then you get that stress level. It could be from many things, but it's kind of cool to see their stress levels. Because it could be from a boat,
and that would be the idea.
predator.
It's right. And then you try and associate that, you try and correlate those high levels with, were there orca in the area, or was there no orca, but there was loads of ships going by, loads of activity. Was there an oil spill recently? Naval sonar, were there naval exercises nearby? You just try and, maybe there's less food, so maybe it's an El Nino year and there's less food and the animals aren't feeding as well, things like that. And it's also, so you try and correlate it with the those different variables, but then also if you can collect like photogrammetry, so body condition data, how fat and essentially healthy the animal is, and you sort of try and tie it all together.
Do you guys get photogrammetry as well when you're doing the SnotBot?
We do, not all the time. Photogrammetry, it was certainly my huge hope for whale science was photogrammetry, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, because it's so easy, or I thought it was so easy to collect this super high quality data set, like a really powerful data set, and it's just a photo. In general, photogrammetry, for those who don't know, is you're taking an image of a whale from above and you calibrate your height, and essentially you work out how wide the animal is, how long it is, how fat the animal is. And in general, a fat whale is a healthy whale. Like a fat whale, it's a really solid indicator of how healthy that animal is. So a photo is, almost more powerful than like a snot sample in some ways. Again, that's a generic statement, but even it's just a photo, but it can be really powerful. The problem with photogrammetry is that if the water's rough, then the outline of that whale is a little blurry. It can be a little tough. So it's I thought that this was going to be like the savior of whale science is photogrammetry, because it'd be so easy to collect these vast, easily. You can compare animals from here, from there. You can do it throughout the whole field season. You can just easily collect this really valuable data set using inexpensive drones. But it's, that water, it's a problem. It's hard to, I'm sure people are still doing it. It's still super valuable, right? But that problem of, the how turbid the water is and how, how murky it is and how rough it is, breaking up the outline of that whale makes it's still super valuable, but it's just not as valuable as I thought it was going to be anyway. But that's my opinion, and hopefully that changes in the future.
Also,
People will work it out.
The whales move around, so it's like it'd be cool if, let's say, you could take a picture of Theodore in Monterey in the very beginning of the season when they get here, but then like that whale could probably move up to Half Moon Bay or go down to Morro Bay or go to Farallon Islands, or it could go. And so the only other way it would work is if you could like get a notification from like Happy Whale or something and be like, oh, it's in Farallon Islands, let's go try to find it and take another photograph. And then you have to hope for the weather to be good. So it'd be kind of tough.
Yeah,
Follow up on
and
whales.
maybe be collaborating with different people. You know, a lot of people have done it on the breeding grounds and seeing how, you know, particularly with mums and calves and that sort of energy transfer from the mum and how quickly they drop that weight, how quickly the calf puts it on, because, you know, obviously females and calves are so important to healthy whale populations. But yeah, it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one, but I still think it has a huge role to play in whale science. It's just, I don't know, I keep saying it, but I had such high hopes for photogrammetry, and you know, I was a little disappointed as it slowly became. I realized that it's not quite the total savior that I thought it would be, but I still think it's hugely important.
Yeah, I mean, at least your whales in the Gulf of Maine don't really move as much. Like in California, they'll cover like 150 miles. And you're like, dude, what? But at least you have a few whales that stay put there.
Well, I'm trying to think, like, if you got whales from like the Alaskan population or Maui, and then you go, or like Pacific Northwest, the thing is it's a lot of times it is calm there during the feeding season because they're tucked in the fjords and stuff. So it might be, maybe it's just like you could use it in certain places. It might be easier to do it where the weather's nice.
Totally. Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, some area. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. To your point, you know, we don't really have that really calm weather as much on the Gulf of Maine, but in other areas, certainly we've done photogrammetry with blue whales in the Gulf of California, and it can be like perfect mirror flat there. It's beautiful and it's great. And, you know, blue whales also, they're not as, you know, humpback whales are, they're smaller and they're sort of more dynamic in their movements. You know, they sort of turn and twist and stuff. And blue whales can't. Yeah, so that can be a challenge for photogrammetry. But those blue whales, they're just so big, and they're just, you know, they're not. They're just right there, and it's they're easier to photogrammetry.
Pacific Whale Foundation and a few collaborators in Hawaii and Southeast Alaska are trying to do the mom calf thing. But I think that in both places, the water is much more workable.
Cascadia does it as well.
Yeah. So, but I know the Gulf of
University
Maine
of Hawaii and
the Gulf of Maine is not calm or clear.
Right. Yeah, it's certainly not clear, which is great for the whales. That's why they're one of the reasons they're there, right? Is all that food. But no, I know there's some really cool Alaska Whale Foundation and the University of Hawaii, and that there's some really cool collaborations going on there with some drone stuff, which is really cool. Yeah.
Nice.
So what are some of the future directions for the SnotBot program? I know you guys have like a release part of the equipment now that you can deploy tags and things.
Yeah, that's the main one we're excited about at the moment. We're deploying data tags on whales. And again, you know, I don't know how much you know about it, but for the listeners, data tags, it's a little tag. It attaches to a whale with a suction cup, and it's like this big. They can, you know, they vary in size, but you get it on a whale. And when they first came out, maybe 25 years ago, it was like huge because data tags, when data tags started getting deployed on whales, you're finally able to understand more information about what the animal's doing underwater. You know, it's so hard to know that. A whale goes underwater, what's it doing? Okay, you know, how deep is it going? How is it feeding? All of this information we really didn't have that much idea on. You can get acoustics. We've done that for a long time, but that can only tell you that much information. Whereas you get a data tag on and it's packed with sensors and accelerometers and hydrophones, and some of them have cameras and depth, you know, recorders, whatever. So it has so much information on it. So it provides really valuable data, like priceless data that really has transformed our knowledge of whales over the last 20 years. The problem with tags is that they're really hard to get on. You know, you've got to race up to that animal. You use a pole. You've got to dunk that tag on it's at the end of the pole. Tags at the end of the pole, and you dunk the tag on the animal's back, and you've got to try and get there at the right time. It's difficult to do. And using this drone skill set that we have, and using the engineering background that we now have, we wanted to see if we could deploy tags using a drone, just dropping it. It's not that, well, it both is that simple and isn't. We went through a pretty rigorous testing system at the beginning of this year, when my colleagues were dropping tags in like a warehouse on ballistics gel that was covered in water, and they were flying drones back and forth in this warehouse. And we had surrogate whales, and we have, was it Wally the surrogate whale, or Walter the something whale? I don't know. They called a little thing you'd have someone pushing this like trolley with like this stuff on it, and then they had some on paddle boards, and they were dropping tags on paddle boards and all this kind of stuff. But you know, turns out that we can do it, and it's looking really exciting. It looks, you know, it's potentially far less invasive than conventional tagging methods, and I believe we'll be able to, you know, achieve quite a high success rate in terms of how many whales we're able to tag. And we've done 4 species now. We've done blues, fins, seis, and humpbacks, which is super cool. So it's really exciting. It's really exciting work. I'm enjoying being a part of it. We've got a call tomorrow about it. Our 2023 at the moment is looking pretty jam-packed because a lot of people want to deploy tags, and it's hard to do. And so we've got a lot of different collaborations in the works that we're trying to get funded at the moment, which is super exciting. But now that tagging stuff is super cool, and particularly when you have the CATS tags, which are the ones with videos on them, and you can see the video of what the whale's doing underwater. That's it's some cool stuff.
I know the Hawaii guys are stoked. Like, they did their preseason meeting a couple weeks ago, and they said they're going to work with you guys, and they're very excited.
Yeah, we've been. Yeah, I think Ian and Chris, 2 of my colleagues, are going out to Hawaii in January or February to work with some folk out there. And certainly we've been in touch with, you know, a bunch of researchers around the world about this. And you know, Ocean Alliance is a nonprofit. Like our MO, right, is to protect these animals. So the ultimate goal is we want to tell everyone how to do this, you know, within reason. Obviously, you need the permits, you need the proper pilots, all that stuff. We don't want to just tell anyone to drop tags on whales. You know, it's got to be the scientists, whatever. But you know, the more people who can do this, I don't know, I think it has the potential to really help push whale science into the 21st century and you know, help protect whales as well. So it's exciting.
Yeah.
I also think you'll get a little bit cleaner data because you won't be running up on the whale.
Yeah.
And so I think like there's a lot of times where they're like, oh, the animal's stressed, but it's like, well, did you run up to the same killer whale 15 times trying to get a tag on it?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know if it'll be possible to get it on killer whales. They're kind of small from the drone, but if you can, that'd be cool. But I just think that it's going to be a lot more and less invasive.
Yeah, less reactionary time in your data set.
Yeah, absolutely. No, 100%. I mean, we haven't, I think that'll be the case as well. We haven't actually, you know, it'll be hard to like compare them explicitly, but I totally, like, I've seen tagging, and it can be invasive. You know, sometimes the whales don't mind it from boat-based tagging, but sometimes they do. And sometimes they notice the drone as well, but we don't really get reactions to it, or at least not strong reactions. But I totally agree that it should provide cleaner data, and the behavior that you're collecting of that animal, it should be an animal behaving in a sort of less disturbed, more natural state, right? So which is what you're saying. Yeah, I agree totally. Yeah,
I think your data means a lot more to people if it's the true natural state of the animal, because that's like, you have to take all this data with a grain of salt a lot of the time, because, you know, was it the collection effort that caused some of the behaviors you got? So
yeah, and you know, at the same time
too.
Sure, and the behavior, what they're doing at the moment, but yeah, totally. I mean, I'm sure behavior depends a lot on all these different variables, and we also don't want to, you know, as much as we're excited by this development, you know, boat-based tagging still has a super important role to play. Like, they're not necessarily different things. Maybe they could be, you know, we've worked on 2 projects that were complementary. We were both trying to do that. You know, we were trying to drone tag, they were trying to vessel-based tag. So, you know, they both have it. We're not like trying to, you know, push that aside. We just we think our method has certain advantages, and in certain situations with certain species, you know, to your point, Slater, for smaller species, I think it would be hard to get a drone on, you know, I mean, a tag on like an orca or something, but yeah, so we'll see. But it's an exciting addition to the sort of the whale scientist toolkit, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Ed Lyman also mentioned something about the potential of applying it for disentanglement effort. Is that something you guys are ready to share?
We've spoken a lot with Ed Lyman. You know, I don't know. We've discussed it. You know, disentangled animals is such a different, it's a different ball game, particularly permit wise. And, you know, obviously the animals are compromised. So understandably, NOAA and National Marine Fisheries are super cautious about what you can do around disentangled animals, and we've never really been that involved in disentanglement. Certainly, that's something that we're interested in. We're super interested in, but that's a little bit further down the line. I think, I don't know, maybe I think my colleagues, it's an interesting one. I think some of them think it's an easy challenge, some of them think it's impossible. So there are internal discussions at Ocean Alliance about all of these questions, and certainly we're in communication with Ed Lyman, which is super cool because he's one of the pros, right, at disentangling whales. So that's exciting, but I don't think that'll be happening anytime too soon. But whales are going to get entangled more and more, maybe not in the States, if regulations come into play, whatever, but certainly around the world, there's just fishing nets and stuff like that are not going away anytime soon. Right. So disentanglement is something that we've got to come up with better solutions to, and maybe drones could help play a role in disentangling whales in the future. Totally.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I don't think it would. I don't know if the drone would actually be able to make a cut. Like I feel like anything you're dragging from the drone, like, would be so hard to get it to attach to a line maybe. But I do think no matter what, the drone's going to help with the disentanglement process, because the images and the different views and angles you can get from the drone already in the last 5 years have been so helpful.
The assessment factor is big.
And they're discussing a few different ideas, and I don't know if, I think they've discussed like trying to actually disentangle a whale, but that is in the future. But they've discussed different things about the tracking buoys, getting the tracking buoys so that they can find the whales and things like that. So there are a bunch of ideas in the works, but that is in the early days. I'm not sure where that'll go, if it'll go anywhere, but certainly it's exciting. Anything that potentially could help these animals is exciting. So we'll see. But
that's cool.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have what's one of your favorite memories from being out in the field?
I'm very lucky. I'm very grateful. I've got a few some favorite memories. We've had some cool experiences with blue whales in Loreto, where it's just been towards sunset. Often they're feeding on krill, and the krill come to the surface at night, or come nearer to the surface. So the animals are feeding at the surface, and there's like these insane sunsets, and then you've got these 90-foot long animal like lunge feeding. Your boat is off, you're just floating there, whatever, and these big animals just lunge feeding around. So that's been cool. Some sperm whales breaching in the Gulf of Mexico. That's been fun. We had a baby sperm whale breaching way out there in the Gulf of Mexico. Melon-headed whales. They're an offshore, like, small toothed whale, a dolphin. And we had in the Gulf of Mexico, we had a group of like 400 like bow riding on the Odyssey for like 4 hours. It was incredible, and I hadn't even seen this species before, and they're just all around for so long. And it was the water was like crystal glass. We weren't actually studying them. We were on our way to another group of sperm whales, but we were traveling,
so
but that's part of it. But they were hitching a free ride. I don't know, we must have taken them a long way from where they were at the time. When we found them, or when they found us, like that's where they wanted to be. And when they left us, they were a long way from there. So it's an interesting one. Like, is there a cost to that? Like, they are not where they started, and they were where they started for a reason. It's unlikely that we were going in the exact direction that they wanted to go. So they must like bow riding, right? I don't know if I'm reading too much into it, but
I think that they just go with the flow sometimes. I don't think they have rules. Like, I think we like to think that it's like they're feeding or they're not, but I think sometimes they just don't have rules, and they go wherever they want. And then they're like, I know where my pod's at. The rest of them, I can hear them. So whatever.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I'm sure you're right. No, I'm sure you're right. Yeah. It was, I just felt a little bad. And the empath in me was like, oh, I hope we're not like taking you away from like a key feeding ground or something. But they know better than I do what they need. So they was cool. It was just a nice experience. But I don't know, we've had some like cool interactions with humpbacks. You know, humpbacks can show curiosity from time to time, so that's always fun. I like the big male sperm whales. There's huge sexual dimorphism in sperm whales, right? Most of the baleen whales, the females are bigger, but the sperm whales, toothed whales, the males are much bigger, and they're just so powerful and graceful, and it's cool. I haven't seen many male sperm whales, but when you do, it's a big, like, powerful animal. It's always cool seeing them. But yeah,
awesome.
there are a few stories. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure I'm missing some of the key ones. Oh, you know what? Bioluminescence. That's a cool one.
Ooh.
If you're traveling at night and in a smaller boat, I've done some offshore trips, and again, this hasn't necessarily been researched, but there's a bunch of bioluminescence in the water, and you get dolphins bow riding, and the sort of trails of bioluminescence they leave. Avatar. That's yeah, right, exactly. That's magical. Like, I've seen that a few times, and that's really cool. Yeah, humpbacks in Alaska. I don't know. I've got a lot. I don't know.
Pretty much anything with a whale in it.
Pretty much all
yeah,
of them.
I know, right? They're
That's
humpbacks. I know everyone loves them, and I want to like the others as well. But humpbacks are just so easy to love, aren't they? They're so charismatic. They can be really fun. Yeah.
Awesome. So if you could ask just people in general one thing to do for the environment, what would you ask them to do, like, as kind of a call to action?
Yeah, sure. I think we're bombarded these days with, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, and there are so many different things. And personally, I just I try and make the changes that are easy for me. I'm not perfect, and I try and progress, but there are certain things that are really easy for me to do that I don't really care that much about. And for some people, it would be the total opposite things. And so, my diet is a big one, right? Diet is a big one in terms of climate change and things like that. Not as, it's not just for whales, no one's eating, well, some people are eating whales, but it's not really that thing. But that's an easy one. Like, I really like vegetables and things like that. So I'm lucky there. That's an easy change to make. I think just, don't beat yourself up, but just make these changes that are easy for you to do in your lifestyle, and then just build on that. And I'm working on it as well. No one's perfect, and you sort of do what you can where you can. And I don't know, that's what I'm trying to do, and I've got a long way to go, no doubt. But you're just trying to make a difference in the areas that you can. So I think that's that would be my call to action.
Good. Nice. Yeah, it's pretty similar to what we say a lot of the time too.
Trying is better than not. Just doing anything, even the smallest things, is helpful.
Yeah, just do something.
Absolutely. Yeah. Super helpful. Yeah.
So how can people follow along with your work at Ocean Alliance and with the SnotBot program? And then how can people support your guys' work, since you're a nonprofit?
Yeah, I mean, so the first part, we were on social media, Ocean Alliance. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. We also have a SnotBot Instagram page, which is just SnotBot, and the symbol is red. And there's Chris, who's the robotics guy, he posts some really cool footage there of the 360 footage of our tagging and SnotBot and blue whales, like with dolphins bow riding on them. There's some really cool footage on that page and on the Ocean Alliance page as well. So those are two ways, and it's super important. Like, this is part of our, it's part of our MO. Our mission is to educate people and to inspire people and to show people these animals. A lot of people don't get to see whales, and we're hoping that by showing them and through social media and stuff that, and it's what you're doing as well, right? What Whale Nerds is for. So, trying to get people, forge a connection between people and the ocean and whales. And so that's super important and really valuable for us to follow our social media and engage with it and comment and all of that. And we are a nonprofit. If you can donate, but I don't want to push that message on too strong. It's tough time, whatever. But yeah, I mean, if you like what you've heard and you're interested in it, then please do donate. And even if aside from that, if you have questions, if anyone has questions about Ocean Alliance, about SnotBot, about tagging, about any of this, reach out to us. Our website is pretty hard to remember. It's whale.org. It's a good one. So
if you ever can't save whales, you can just sell the domain and go whale watching wherever you want.
So you can reach out to us there, and our email is info@whale.org. It's whale singular, whales plural is a different group, so some people get confused there. We know them, they're great people as well, but reach out, please, like engage with us. Like that's what we're here for. It's not just the research, it's communicating that research to the public as well is really important to us. So please do.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for being on with us and talking about whale snot. We really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for listening. We appreciate you sticking around through to the end of the episode. And can't wait to see you on the next one.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for listening.